Hello everyone, this is Crimson. I just wanted to make this short little addition to the start of the video. So, during recording of the part 1 of the Deadspace art book, the book ended up being slightly out of frame at the bottom on some pages. That was completely my fault and I genuinely apologize. I have done my best to try and alleviate that, and I've gone back and I've re-recorded some of these sections, but yeah, I just wanted to let you guys know that I am aware of it and I am genuinely sorry, and I will make a conscious effort going forward, not just with this book but with all of my future art book videos, to ensure that the book stays in frame at all times. Thank you very much and enjoy the video. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Crimson and in this video we are going to be starting our look through of the Art of Deadspace art book. This is an art book that I have been excited about covering on the channel for quite a while, based on one, being a big Deadspace fan, and I have not actually gone through this entire art book yet. I've only skimmed it because I wanted to kind of keep it to go through it live with you guys. So, for those of you who are not familiar with Deadspace, Deadspace is a third-person shooter, psychological horror game, which, in my opinion, and this is just my personal preference, of course, Deadspace is my favorite horror game of all time. Either Deadspace 1 or Deadspace 2, I don't know. I actually started with Deadspace 2 and then went back and played Deadspace 1, so I think I favor Deadspace 2 a little bit more just because that was my entry point into the series. So, yeah, let's just get started. So we see on the sleeve cover here, we have this picture of Isaac in his engineer suit. And let's just read what's on the back of the book. So it says, "The Art of Deadspace is the ultimate gallery of the Deadspace universe, with over 300 iconic concept art images and sketches, many never seen before, and detailed commentary from the acclaimed artists throughout. From the necromorph-infested depths of the USG Ishimura to the frozen tundra of Tau Volantis, Deadspace's dramatic scope is sure to fantasize and terrify in equal parts." That is true. Now, I believe, and based on just my understanding of when I bought the book and based on the description on the back of the book, that this book covers all 3 Deadspace games, so 1, 2, and 3. Really looking forward to seeing about Deadspace 1. Absolutely super excited to go through Deadspace 2. And then there is Deadspace 3, which, you know, it exists, unfortunately, but we are going to cover it nonetheless. So yeah, let us get started. One thing I should mention, I just want to, actually, you know what? I'll save that to when we get to a bit of him. So we start off with a Rorschach test here. Again, this is, I'm assuming this is meant to look like Isaac Clarke's helmet. Maybe you guys see something different, let me know. And actually, I forgot to say that at the time of me recording this video, the Deadspace 1 remaster has been out for about 10 or 11 months at this point, and the remaster is absolutely amazing. However, the original game actually didn't really need a remaster. there's some games where they get too old and too clunky, and it's like, okay, it's time to, you know, polish things up a bit. The original Dead Space is 110% still playable and still as enjoyable and terrifying, despite it having slightly worse graphics. So if you are interested by this book in playing Dead Space, both the original and the remaster version are available on Steam, and I really appreciate the fact that they left the original game up for sale when the remaster came out, because a lot of the times when remasters for games come out, they remove the original from the store page, so anyone who wants to play the game has to play the remaster. For example, like Resident Evil 3 remaster or remake. So let's get started. So here we have, actually, you know what? Just before we move too much further, I'm just gonna remove the sleeve so that it is out of our way. It just says Dead Space in an embossed logo on the cover. You guys might not be able to make it out. So here we have our protagonist throughout the entire series, Isaac Clarke. Isaac Clarke is a engineer for space ships and spacecrafts, which is really cool because at the time, you know, most horror game protagonists then were badass, super elite soldiers, going in, you know, think like Resident Evil, where you're playing as like Chris Redfield or Leon Kennedy, you know, all extremely skilled in combat, and all. But Dead Space, on the other hand, kind of mixes things up a little bit. Isaac is an engineer, and in Dead Space 1, he's essentially just the repairman, and yet he is able to fight his way through the game. We will get more in detail about that as we continue, because I don't want to spoil too much right now. Sorry, let me move the camera a little bit. There we go. Here we go. So this is a screenshot from, I believe this was a promotional art piece for Dead Space 2. We have Isaac, who is currently in space, in zero gravity, firing his plasma cutter at the necromorphs here. And I'm not going to get ahead of myself despite wanting to, but I will discuss what necromorphs are later. Now, his weapon here is called the plasma cutter, and it's the most iconic weapon in Dead Space. In fact, in the original Dead Space, there is an achievement for beating the game only using the plasma cutter, and I got this on my very first playthrough of the original Dead Space. I didn't even know it was an achievement. I just, one, really like the plasma cutter. I mean, it's good. It's one of those weapons that's good in every situation, and you can upgrade it so it has crazy damage. And I believe the final upgrade is something mad, like, you know, shots that land on targets cause the enemy to burst into flames. So yeah, and also, since I mentioned the remaster, this art book came out before the release of the remaster. So all of the Dead Space 1 content in this book is going to be from the original Dead Space 1 rather than the remaster. Okay, so here is our table of contents. This is just a forward thing about Visceral Studios. I'm not going to read too much into this because this is just about the studio. Visceral Studios is the studio that made Dead Space 1, 2, and 3. They eventually got bought by EA, and then when Dead Space 3 flopped, EA did its usual and sent Visceral Games to the Shadow Realm. So yeah, Visceral Games is no longer with us, and Dead Space 4 was cancelled. But if it was going to be anything like Dead Space 3, I'm actually glad it was cancelled. Okay, our introduction. Isaac Clarke, here we go. This is again a picture from Dead Space 2. So this is the suit that Isaac has in Dead Space 2. This is like the default suit. There are different variants you can get that offer certain rewards. But yeah, and this is his plasma cutter. So there is a little bit about Isaac Clarke here, so let us read it. So I'm just moving this a bit closer so I can see. So, an ordinary hero. Video game leads are usually cut from the same cloth, be they super soldiers, bravado cops, or daring renegades. There's no shortage of extraordinary hero. Isaac Clarke is a little different though. An everyman placed in a horrifying situation. He is in many ways the perfect cipher for players lost in the bloody chaos of the Dead Space games. Cannot agree with this paragraph enough. When you're starting up your project, you're thinking, what can your player do? How does the environment react to him and things like that, explains creative director Ben Wanat. Apologies if I mispronounced your name. You're not really thinking about his personality at that point. Very quickly we decided we didn't want someone who is a superhero. As an engineer, Isaac Clarke could stake a claim to being one of video games' most prominent working class heroes. Very true. If it wasn't for a certain plumber, I wonder who that could be, his profession is more than just a way of grounding the character though. It's also a way of making him fit within the game experience. The engineer thing really fitted, says Wanat. We were thinking of puzzles, so it was great to have a guy who works on machines. Of course, it also gives you the excuse of having this guy who goes to this rundown spaceship where he's going to fix everything. So yeah, that's just a little bit about Isaac Clarke. Like I had previously mentioned, he's not a hero, he's not a soldier, he's not a cop, he's just a repairman essentially, which is really cool. Getting to play as they said here, an everyman. One thing I forgot to mention in the beginning is in Dead Space 1, the original, Isaac Clarke is a silent protagonist. And then in the Dead Space 1 remake, Isaac Clarke talks. This is very divisive among the community as to which is better. I just think having a silent protagonist is cool. However, it is kind of funny that throughout the game, Isaac is being told to do this, go here, repair this, kill this, realign this, and the whole time he doesn't say anything, he just goes and does it, which is hilarious. He kind of does the same thing in the remake, but he does kind of talk back a little bit, which is understandable. Someone trapped on a hellhole like the Ishimura wouldn't exactly be keen on going into enemy territory to fix a bloody air conditioner or whatever Isaac does. Okay, so these are concept arts for Isaac. So we see I believe these are the two concept arts in and of themselves. Here and here, he appears to have a weapon wielded onto his arm, which is an interesting choice. He also does not have a helmet and just has welder's goggles, which is very cool. And speaking of Isaac's design, one thing I need to mention is this bar that you see on the back of Isaac. What is this? Dead Space does something incredible. where all of your stuff that would normally be in your HUD in normal games, such as your ammo, your health, in Deadspace's case, your stasis. So this is, it is all on Isaac's back. So there are no menus for healing. There's no menus for anything. Every status of Isaac can be viewed just by looking at him. So this is him at full health. As Isaac takes damage, this will slowly deplete and turn from blue to yellow, and then yellow to red. And then this is the stasis or kinesis meter, which works very similar. The more you use it, the more this goes down, and you have to refill it at certain stations. We will get into what stasis is a little later. So here is some more concept art. So let's see. Sorry, let me move the camera a little bit. So this says, Isaac wasn't born whole. He went through some surprising iterations early on in the creation of the first Deadspace. We had a bunch of early concepts where he had energy weapons and blades. I'm assuming that's what these are meant to be here. And this looks like a blade version of Isaac here. Where was I? Says when at. But it just wasn't working, so we scaled it back and thought, who is Isaac, the man, and how does he fit into this? Early concepts show an Isaac that is more archetypal video game lead, which is true. These do look more like your standard horror game protagonists, with sketches showing a rugged and more traditionally heroic protagonist. Over time, the Isaac that went out to define Deadspace emerged. Now, this is not to say that Isaac is not heroic. He is extremely heroic and extremely brave. However, he does not appear to be heroic or brave just by looking at him. He looks just like a normal repairman. He doesn't look like a badass. You know, like this guy here looks like a badass. So do these guys. This is an exoskin 0G combat armor, so this is obviously for zero gravity. Here is a bit of concept art. So we have lightly armored professor suit, for added mobility, energy spikes, offensive and defensive melee energy weapons, small ranged sidearm for backup, and magnetic boots. Deadspace features a lot of areas that have 0G, so that's why in designs there are stuff like the 0G combat armor and magnetic boots. It's so Isaac can kind of walk around these 0G areas by walking on like the walls and the ceilings and stuff without floating off and away. One thing about the original game and the remaster that is a absolute improvement regardless of what anyone says. In the original, the 0G areas are very frustrating because you have to essentially dive from one spot to the other, and I don't know if it's just me, but I found this to be very buggy on PC. In the remaster, you have just free floating around 0G areas, which I believe is the same in Dead Space 2, but that is one of those improvements that needed to be made, and I'm so glad they did, because it turned 0G areas, for me anyway, from an area that, you know, I would sigh and roll my eyes every time I had to go into one, to actually being excited about going in and getting to float around and stuff. And most of the 0G areas are for puzzles, but there's also enemies that are on the walls and that will leap at you and stuff. So it's very, very cool. Here is some more concept art of Isaac. However, these ones are a lot closer to the final design of Isaac with his suit. It looks very industrial, lots of metal plating. You can see the health bar. As you upgrade the suit in Deadspace, it gets more armor plating. So as you can see here, this is just a kind of quick example. You know, you start off the game with a suit like this that's mainly just a basic engineering suit. And then as you progress and unlock more suit upgrades, you slowly start to build up. And by the end, you end up looking something like this, like absolutely covered in armor, but still in mechanics uniform, which is really, really cool. There are alternate outfits and armor sets that you can get for Isaac. But for me personally, when I play Dead Space, I always just keep them on the original because I think the original armor is so, so cool. So let's read what it says here. It says, a constant visual motif in the Dead Space universe is ribbing. Ribbing meaning that's these kind of armor bits here that increase as you level up your suit. It is, sorry, where was I? It is represented in the architecture of the Ishimura, the layout of the sprawl, and the seared ice plains of Tau Volantis. It is also an internal part of Isaac's suit. The design was very random at the beginning, with pencil sketches of a varied design. Illuminates artist Shi Wei Lao. I apologize if I butchered your name. But as our fiction started to shape up, with Isaac being a space engineer stranded in a horrific ship, struggling to survive, some of the sketches I drew started to click with the idea. I linked the unique ribbing motif with a lot of repeated blocky plates on top of the bodysuit. So those plates are these bits here, the white parts. The suit's ribbing reinforces that motif, ties in visually with the design of the Ishimura, and has other purposes too. Technologically, we wanted to invest in the lighting. So a serrated texture like that gives a lot of the light to play around on, says the director Ian Milham. Again, apologies, I'm terrible at names. Who has helped define the look of Dead Space from its genesis. The player's going to move through the lighting, and it gave the shadows a lot to do. So yeah, Dead Space is a very dark game, not like in terms of its story or anything. It is a very dark story, but dark in the literal sense that the environments are very, very dark, and necromorphs like to hide in the shadows. But yeah, that's just a bit of cool insight into Isaac's design. I am trying not to get ahead of myself, so if I'm reading things or I'm talking about things and such as, you know, the Ishimura, and you might be wondering, you know, what's the Ishimura? We will be covering that later on in the book. I did do a quick skim through. But I don't want to get ahead of myself, and I'd rather wait until we get to that section to cover it in great detail. So here is some more concept art of Isaac's suit. We have three different variations, sorry. So we have this one with a single slot visor, this one which has a kind of half dome faceplate. This reminds me a lot of the EVA helmet from Halo. And then this one has two eye slots here, circular ones, which is really cool. And here it says, Isaac's suit empowers the player, but it is also important that it's still maintenance on air and valuable resources. We wanted to communicate that he is not a soldier, says Milhelm. He needs to look tough and strong because he's a hero, but he's not a soldier. As soon as you put big plates on the front, it looks like he's designed to be shot at, which is very, very funny. So, here we have Isaac hacking his way through some necromorphs. I'm not sure what this weapon here actually is. It looks like the Ripper gun, maybe? Just based on the circular design here. I could be wrong about that. If I am, I apologize, but we have a necromorph here who Isaac is in the middle of killing, and then we have another necromorph behind him, trying to sneak up on him. Here is a great piece. So I'm just going to quickly read what it says, and then we'll talk about the art. In the first Deadspace, Isaac's suit reflected the cold steel of the Ishimura, while in the second, the different facets of the sprawl actually never mind, we'll get to that later, meant a variety of different looks. For Dead Space 3, Isaac's signature look is defined by the icy expanses of Tau Volantis with the rugged and protective snowsuit. So yeah, that is one good thing. It's like kind of a diamond in a pile of shit in Dead Space 3, that the snowsuit armor and everything in Tau Volantis looks amazing. So here we have Isaac with his plasma cutter fighting a necromorph. This is actually one of the bosses that we encounter throughout the game. We fight him many times. He's one of those bosses that we fight him, and then when his health gets low, he runs off, and then we fight him like 3 more times before we kill him. Isaac looks like he's rappelling up a side of a cliff based on the footwear that he has and the rope here. And we also have a little necromorph here. I don't know if you can see this, but it is basically a head with 4 little legs. So kind of like a more horrific version of a head crab from Half-Life. Okay, here is some really good stuff, concept art-wise, of Isaac. This is Isaac's design in Dead Space 3. And I just want to say, this stuff right here, like this kind of concept art, is the reason I love art books. I adore seeing concept art of characters, weapons, areas, and all that. So we are going to read first, and then we will discuss the artwork. So, Dead Space 3 shifts to a colder, harsher locale. In Dead Space 3, we wanted to try something different, mainly driven by the fiction and environments that Isaac would be placed in, which involves a deserted base and a shipwrecks from a couple hundred years ago, as well as the ice planet itself. We needed suits that could look very aged and have a thick, bulky silhouette that would echo the cold weather. There's also less use of metal plating, which is true. So we used a lot more cloth on this suit. So yeah. So here is some of that concept art. So here we have some kind of sketches of it, variations of the different types of helmets and how they might be assembled, which is really cool. Here is a little bit of a sleeker armor design. This looks more akin to something out of Dead Space 2. But here is an example of what I am talking about earlier with the health system. So the guy on the right here has full health, and the guy on the left here has very, very low health. So it's a way of keeping it all in-game, tied to Isaac. You can see everything that you need to, your ammo, your stasis, your health. you view your ammo when you aim down your sights at an enemy. There is an ammo reader that pops up that is part of the heads-up display in Isaac's helmet. So it's a great way of making the game more streamlined, and also keeping stuff like menus more in universe, so it doesn't take you out of the experience. Here is a picture of the snowsuit design in Dead Space 3. So again, we have a very similar looking helmet, and it appears to be that Isaac, or whoever this is meant to be, is still wearing their armor underneath. However, they then have snow gear on top of it, and I just think it looks really cool. And I also like the addition of the shoes for climbing ice. Just a very cool detail. Again, another picture. This is this character, but from behind. And here is a totally different character, concept art. Much more tubes, but doesn't look as fitted for snowy environments as this guy does. Also, just quickly before we move on, I just want to say I know that my reading skills so far in this book have been pretty subpar compared to my previous videos. That's just because I am very tired. At the time of me recording this, I have been awake for just under half an hour, so I'm still kind of half asleep, but once I wake up a bit more, it should be fine, and I'll be back to my normal reading skills. So yeah, let's move on. So here we have some more designs. Let's just read what it says here. Dead Space 2 introduced a variety of suits for Isaac, some of which reinforce the series' original aesthetic, while others hinted at other influences on the original design. We wanted the design to have a vintage look, which is echoed in the look of those diver suit designs, says Lau. The nautical theme is not isolated to the suits. It's something that recurs in the necromorphs later on in the series, in some of the new alien species. And that is true. Isaac's suit is very much inspired by some of the old diving suits, like not modern diving suits, but if you look back at some of the very early type of diving suits, they play a big inspiration. So let's have a look-see at this art. So these are all designs on the health bar on Isaac's back, and where they would be placed, what they would look like, how big they are, which is really cool. I think they absolutely nailed the design. These ones are cool, but the one we got in the final product is excellent. And here we have the faceplate that transforms into Isaac's helmet, which is really cool. The whole way Isaac's suit kind of goes together, and the way that this neck guard kind of forms into his helmet is so cool to see in all of the Dead Space games. Here we have some more in-depth character art. So here is just a normal standard human compared to someone in Isaac's armor. Here is a picture of Isaac's helmet. We have the sketch version, and then here's the full color version. Here we have two of the same armor sets. This one is half colored in, half sketch, while this one is fully colored in. This suit here looks very sleek and looks very slim compared to Isaac's standard armor. And here is another rendition of Isaac's armor set. This one appears to be more padded compared to his normal suit, and I actually really like the little accents of red that are on this as well. Shopping for suits. Suit customization becomes an ever bigger part of the Deadspace games throughout the series. The suiting mechanisms that are dotted around the game's locales are fittingly industrial, a collection of whirring servos and busy robotic arms. A Paris boutique this most certainly isn't, and they are a perfect example of the quintessential video game objective or video game object being woven into Deadspace's fictional fabric. So these are this are the re-suiting stations. So whenever you buy a new suit of armor or upgrade Isaac's standard suit of armor, he climbs into this machine and the door is shut and you see a bunch of lights going down, you know, as if the armor is being kind of mechanically attached to him. And then he steps out and his helmet then forms around his head, which is cool. If you have not played Deadspace, I would look up an animation for the Deadspace suiting up animation that plays here, because it is very, very cool. Here is another picture of the suiting station, and this is kind of the interior of this structure here, where we see Isaac, or a human, in the resuiting apparatus, ready to be suited up. So here, this is a bit of in-universe information about suiting up rather than a lore tidbit or a note from the developers. So it says, attention, use caution when stepping into the suiting mechanism. Make sure to securely stand on the steel footing and remain still as the sensors measure your size and weight to properly configure your suit. Keep arms and legs safely within the position tabs to ensure a proper fit. Do not try to get out of the suiting position until the process is complete and you hear a double beeping sound, similar to the single beeping sound heard when initiating the procedure. Do not attempt to force your limbs into position. The machine can cause bodily harm unless the suiting person remains completely still. Remember to always select a suit that you are capable of using. Advanced suits are not for young adults or small children. Remain calm and close eyes in case helmet attachment tools engage near the eye. So getting suited up is a very dangerous procedure, and I always had that thought when playing the Deadspace games. Seeing the suiting mechanism is like, you know, if someone were to move or if the machine malfunctioned or something while you were in there, you would be absolutely done for, which I think is really, really cool. So here we have some suits and we have some schematics. The text here is tiny, so I am going to do my very, very best to read it. So the helmet, extended neck verticality as much as possible during the helmet attachment. The torso, inhale and hold a deep breath to ensure the attachment of the torso portion of this suit. Pointing to the knees. Knees should remain relaxed with a slight bend. Here it says some discomfort may occur as clasps position your body into the proper position. Here it is pointing to the shoulder pad. It says shoulders are to remain down in case of a forward position. The gloves or gauntlets or forearm pieces. It says gloves are snugly conforming to initial position of fingers, so it is recommended that a neutral position is used during the process, initiation. This is pointing to the waist. It says waistlines can be adjusted after the suit change depending on the size of the suit model. And pointing to the boots, it says boots are the first applied and begin the process of suiting up. So the way it works is it suits you up starting at your feet and working up all the way to your head. Things like this I really like little in-universe information about certain mechanics. I just think it's really cool. And yeah, it would be terrifying to have something go wrong in the suiting station. Okay, next up. I believe this is a new section. This is the characters of Deadspace. So it says, Isaac is an isolated character, but sometimes he's joined by fellow humans throughout their journey. More often, foe than friend. Introduced in Deadspace 3, Norton is a threat to Isaac, though not in the same traditional limb-ripping sense. Rather, he is a close companion to Isaac's love interest, Ellie, and his relationship sparks off an emotional conflict that runs through the overreaching horror of the Necromorph Menace. So basically what happens is Ellie is a character introduced in Deadspace 2, I apologize, and she is one of the main supporting or side characters in the game, and spoiler alert, she ends up saving Isaac's life at the end of Deadspace 2. And then when Deadspace 3 starts, we find out that after the events of Deadspace 2, Isaac and Ellie got into a relationship together. However, that relationship ended, and based on what we see in the first cutscene of Deadspace 3, it doesn't look like Isaac is over it completely. So in Deadspace 3 then, when we encounter Ellie, she is accompanied by the commander of the unit that they are with, but the commander is also her boyfriend. So she is overjoyed to see Isaac again, and Isaac is overjoyed to see her again. However, he does not like this at all, and he is very antagonistic towards Isaac through the entire game because of this, which is crazy. Like, imagine there's a necromorph infestation, and you know, potentially around every corner you're gonna get limb for limb, but the whole time you're just, you know, jealous of your girlfriend's ex-boyfriend. That's crazy to me. Okay, next up. Details of suit character designs for Norton. Norton is this guy here and Ellie's boyfriend and commander in Deadspace 3. Santos above, this is Santos here. We will look at her in a minute. And Ellie, this is Ellie below here. Ellie is not the first love interest for Isaac in Deadspace because he had his long-term girlfriend Nicole in Deadspace 1, but that did not end well. Won't go in any further until we get to that part of the book. But she has won over on Nicole by not being a hallucination that's driving him to suicidal insanity. So yeah, Isaac, the marker did a real number on Isaac, and he has hallucinations of his dead girlfriend. So this is Norton here, again in his snow suit. He has more typical military style armor, since he's kind of like a soldier compared to Isaac. Horton up here again. I can't remember what her occupation is in the game. I do not believe she is a soldier, but she doesn't really wear armor. She just wears the snow-covered attire. And Ellie is a little bit of both. Ellie looks also to be kind of like not a mechanic, but, you know, someone who works aboard the ship and has survived the events of Dead Space 2. What is interesting, and is never mentioned or brought up, is in Dead Space 2, Ellie loses an eye. I believe it is her right eye, I think. So I relate to her on that level. But then in Dead Space 3, she shows up with both eyes. So either she got a prosthetic eye, which no one ever mentions. You would think Isaac, upon seeing her, would be like, oh my god, you got your eye fixed. Or the devs just forgot. And normally I would not think of something like that as the devs just forgot. But if you have played Dead Space 3, the devs forgetting is 100% plausible. In my opinion, anyway. Can you guys tell that I do not like Dead Space 3? Okay, here are some more characters, but we will again read what it says first. Tau Volantis introduces a new human faction to the Dead Space universe, the Sovereign Colony's Armed Forces, or SCAF. A military crew who find themselves on the brutal ice planet, that's Tau Volantis, and their look as, and the look as well as their demeanor has been toughened by the elements. The SCAF are ultimately revealed to be tangled within a conspiracy surrounding the markers and played a pivotal role in unearthing its true purpose. So this is some of the designs of some of the SCAF enemy types. I am not a fan of these guys. They look really cool in this art book, don't get me wrong. Their designs are incredible, especially this guy here with his suit of armor and his kind of gas mask thing. But having human enemies that then devolves into a cover-based third-person shooter in a Dead Space game is just wrong and does not fit the themes of the game at all. Whoever thought of this and implemented it into the game, why? That's okay, tangent over. Here we go. This is what I was looking forward to. So, the USG Ishimura. So we will read what it says, and it says quite a bit, so excuse me if I stutter a few times. I'll try my best not to. So, the Planet Cracker. The USG Ishimura is a planet cracker, a hulking industrial ship that is designed for one purpose, to mine entire planets in a bid to save a dying Earth. But inside it holds a deadly secret, a warren of dark corridors and deathly shadows that's home to one of video games' best horror stories. The Ishimura came about because we really wanted to do some big sci-fi ideas in the story, says Ben Winnat. We wanted it to be grounded, but we also wanted it to throw in some elements that border on the fantastical. That's where the whole idea of planet cracking, where you've got a large industrial ship that goes around and destroys an entire planet to get the resources from it. It is spectacular. It is that spectacular function that initially dictated the Ishimura's design and took the ship on a very different path to the one it would finally settle upon. In the initial design, it was these glistening towers and this almost beautiful setting, but we thought that that wasn't going to work for the horror. So we took this notion of this oil rig out at sea and built that into this planet cracking idea. We started to get some sketches out and began to see some designs we were really happy with. the grounded industrial roots of the USG Ishimura can be seen in the exposed ironwork and creaking steel that keep it together. It is a structure that is It is a structure that is unequivocal in its own construction, an explicitness that is essential part of its design. A reference point was a Gothic architecture structure. Those are built. Those are buildings that are really easy to read how they are held up, reveals Ian Milhelm. Today's artwork with cantilevers and different technologies, they purposely hide that as much as possible. We tried to make the supports exposed so it feels like a tangible space with weight and believability. It's that believability that gives the Ishimura resonance. Although a fantastical ship built for some 400 years in the future, it's a living, breathing space. And any players who survived the nightmare will likely tell you it's almost as if they have been there. So a couple of things we're just going to talk about. So the USG Ishimura is the ship that the first Deadspace game takes place on. Now, it mentioned here that this is a planet-cracking ship. So what is planet cracking? Essentially, Earth is so overpopulated that they are almost fully out of natural resources. So planet cracking became the most efficient way to get resources. So lots of ships like the Ishimura are sent out to do just that, crack planets. However, the Ishimura is among one of the finest of the planet cracking ships. It's almost like the Titanic in terms of its majesty compared to other ships, even other planet crackers. So what is planet cracking? Planet cracking is a process where the ship essentially rips chunks out of the planet piece by piece. As you can see here, this massive chunk of the planet is being lifted up and is then pulled into the Ishimura, where it is mined and has all of its natural resources extracted. This continues until the planet no longer exists. So they essentially cannibalize planets to get their resources, and this is a common practice in the Deadspace universe. However, planet cracking takes years to do. Just one planet, even a small planet, never mind a big planet. So, because of this, the USG Ishimura and other planet cracking ships aren't just mining vessels. They are essentially flying cities because it takes so long. All of the workers bring their families with them. So you have not just the engineers and, your typical ship personnel such as, the captain, the security forces, the medical personnel, but you also have, civilians, people's wives, people's husbands, people's children, and stuff like schools and cafes and everything. It's designed to be a place where people are going to do their best to live a quote-unquote normal life during the years in which it takes to crack a planet. And the way it also works is the Ishimura and other planet-cracking ships set up a small little colony on the surface of the planet that they are cracking, just to help the process of getting the cracked piece of the planet through the atmosphere into space, at which point the Ishimura then brings it in with its gravity field. The Ishimura is one of my favorite spaceships in all of science fiction, and it's super, super iconic. Anyone who plays horror games or likes horror games knows the Ishimura, and it's amazing. From the outside, the USG Ishimura looks like the upturned corpse of a dead animal. We started creating this motif in the fiction that everything would have these ribs repeated everywhere, says Ben Winat. I think that more than anything, this is one of the marks of Deadspace, where you see those horizontal slats everywhere, even on Isaac's face, that all came from the Ishimura's design. And yeah, the Ishimura is a very well designed ship. They did a great job of making it look unique, making it look very intimidating. So here are some pictures of the Ishimura, and here is a picture of the Ishimura in the midst of planet cracking. So this is a massive, massive chunk of the planet that they have ripped up and is currently being pulled up. You can see that there's lines that are attaching from the rib-like structures to the part of the planet. So here we have a picture of all of the different decks and rooms of the Ishimura. So we have the engineering deck, which is reddish pink, the hydronics oxygen farm, the cargo hold. The cargo hold is where they would hold all of the material that they get from the cracking of planets. The gravity center, the mining deck, the flight deck, the science and medical deck, the crew deck, and the bridge communications deck. And yeah, it is very, very cool. As you can see, all the decks are color coordinated here on this map. So, exploring the Ishimura. Too often video games send you to an incredible place that have one major flaw. They don't feel like places and instead feel like a video game level, built with the express purpose of tunneling you from one checkpoint to another. The USG Ishimura is free from such criticism, though. Blueprints reveal that it was designed to be a functioning space. Ben Winat describes some of the thinking behind the approach. As we looked at the ship room by room, we knew that it was going to be really important to link it all together so the player could understand where they were in the ship and make them feel like it was large and a functioning facility. Right there, the feeling very large is a very nice addition to the remake in the form of the tram. In the original Deadspace, you would exit the tram, do that level, go back to the tram, and move on to the next station or the next section. And the fact that the ship needs a tram in order to get around just shows how big it is. However, in the remake, you are able to go back and visit previous locations that you have already visited, which is really cool for, unlocking secrets and stuff like that, or just exploring. So I really like that about the remake. It's definitely one of the better things that it's not open world at all, but it just gives you the freedom to be like, you know what, I want to go back and explore, I don't know, the mining deck or something if you've already been there. Sorry, did I miss something? No, I did not. Okay, moving on. This looks like where things start to get bad. So this is inside of the Ishimura, and as you can tell by these images, something is very, very wrong. We see the corridor here is in disarray. There's some kind of organic growth on the walls and a bit on the floor. There's an operating table covered in blood, as well as blood on the ceiling here and more blood on the window here. This looks like a deck that has multiple dead bodies on it. Isaac is a workman, and what is a workman without his tools? In keeping with the industrial blue-collar vibe that's woven into Deadspace's fabric, a fabric that's in all likelihood oil splash denim, tools take the place of weapons in this universe, a fact that gives the combat a unique edge. There's an interesting aspect that as an engineer, Isaac is more comfortable around tools, and we really liked the part of it. Ben Renat says, we decided we wanted combat to be a messy, tool-based thing and very gritty. It changes the nature quite a bit from bullets. That it most certainly does. The first Dead Space was praised for its unique dismemberment gunplay, a different slant on action mechanics that was heavily informed by Isaac's toolset. Most video games trade in headshots, but in Dead Space, it's about limb shots and severing the necromorph's diseased protrusions. So, since Isaac is an engineer and not a soldier, all of his weapons that he uses are engineering tools, which is really, really cool because, it wouldn't make sense. It's like, why would a engineer all of a sudden start using, military weaponry? There is, in the first Dead Space, there is one traditional gun, and that is the pulse rifle. It's a fully automatic assault rifle, and it is the worst gun in the game because it's terrible at dismemberment. All of his tools are engineering tools, and because this isn't just normal engineering, this is 400 years in the future space engineering, most of which is done in 0G. These tools do not mess around. So, the plasma cutter is just that. It is a cutting tool that shoots plasma and is perfect for cutting off enemy limbs in Dead Space, and is one of my reasons why Dead Space is my favorite horror game, just because of how unique that aspect alone is. So here we have the bench. So let's read what it says, and then I'll talk a bit more about the bench. So the bench. An extension of Isaac's reliance on tools is the workbench. Here the player can upgrade and augment their weapon set, and it often offers a welcome pause. Okay, power tools. This looks like we are getting into the weapons. So let's read what it says before we start looking at the images. Considering the incredible technological power and sheer number of opponents that Isaac faces, his own arsenal is strictly limited, facing down alien life forms capable of massive destruction with little more than power tools. Pretty much 80% of Isaac's weapons are industrial tools, with the few exceptions of military guns he ends up finding or scavenging during the game, reveals Shi Wai Lao. Though many of these weapons started with the game designers looking for fun gameplay methods, I started by looking up real-life tools and references, working with the art director's input on what he likes to see in this particular tool. Then I generate rounds and rounds of sketches of various shapes and designs. The real-world influence in Deadspace's toolset are usually pretty obvious. Walk around any tool hire place and you'll likely be able to spot the ancestors of Isaac's deadly weapons. It is probably best not to test how they fare against rotten flesh, though, should you want to see how the deposits returned. Anyway, so yeah, as I had mentioned earlier, Isaac being an engineer, all of his weapons, apart from one in the original Dead Space, are engineering tools. So, we have a lot of stuff on this page. So first off, we have the Ripper gun. This gun shoots out a massive spinning saw blade, which is incredible. It's great at taking out limbs, and its alt fire means that you can just shoot it out directly, cutting enemies in half. Here is multiple variations of the plasma cutter, and then we have guns down here. So we have the 1M-B22 handheld ore cutter, aka the line gun. This essentially serves as the shotgun of Dead Space. The 211-V plasma cutter, which is our favorite gun. The PFM 100 hydrogen torch, which is our flamethrower. And our handheld gravitational accelerator. I believe that this is a kind of railgun, but I actually can't remember. I do apologize. And up here, these are the scavenger bots that are featured in Dead Space 3. The way they work is, because Dead Space 3 has a crafting system, you need resources to craft certain weapons and certain attachments. So when you get to an area, a little pop-up will appear saying, this is a resource-rich zone, and then you send out your little drone. And depending on how long he's out for, by the time you get to the next, either a shop or a save station or a workbench, the bot will come back and give you all of the resources that he found. This isn't one of my favorite features in Dead Space 3. I personally don't like it. And what makes it even worse is, this being an EA game after all, there are microtransactions that you can do that involve these little bots. So first off, you can pay to have them find more resources. You can pay to have more than one bot active at one given time, and you can just pay to buy resources directly and skip out on the bots altogether. I'm not a fan of it. I know a lot of people feel strongly about microtransactions in single player games, and I am one of them, but this to me is just like really scraping the bottom of the barrel in terms of lowest of the low. And yeah, again, another reason I do not like Dead Space 3. Moving on. So here is some more pictures of let me zoom out a little bit. Of the line gun. This fires a high-powered beam, kind of similar to the plasma cutter's horizontal fire, but much, much more powerful. This thing is capable of cutting an enemy in half with a single shot. Like I said, it is the Dead Space shotgun. Here is the line gun again. This is like a sketch version, whereas this is a colored version. Here we have the pulse rifle, which in Dead Space 1, and I'm pretty sure Dead Space 2 as well, is the only military style weapon and actual firearm that we find in the game. It is a fully automatic assault rifle, and it's just absolutely abysmal. in my opinion. It is terrible at cutting off limbs, so even though I played the game only using the plasma cutter, on subsequent playthroughs when I have used all of the other weapons, I avoid this thing like the plague. This weapon here, I am actually not sure what this weapon is. If anyone knows, can you please let me know in the comments, because I'm completely drawing a blank. Here we go with some more weapons. So, let's start here. So, Deadspace's slight nautical theme is a referenced by the javelin gun, a high-end, heavy-duty weapon. It's more than a little reminiscent of the diver's spear gun combined with Isaac's antique suit, and you've got an image that looks like it's been plucked straight out of the pages of a Jules Verne novel. So this is the gun here. Very, very interesting. Over here, let's see, I gotta move the book a little bit closer, sorry. This is first introduced in Dead Space 2. The detonator boasts the capability to fire off sticky mines that are then triggered by movement, so like proximity and stuff. Perfect for laying a trap, or managing busy crowds of necromorphs, a piece of kit that no toolbox should be without. And then also down here, the fiction of Dead Space is carried through even in the smallest elements of its world. The rivet gun, which is this gun here, for example, is a product of Timson Tools, an imagined manufacturer within the game. Its slogan is "Tough Job, Tough Tools," and whose logo is a common sight among Dead Space 2 in the sprawl. In the real world, the company name is a nod to the lead engineer of Dead Space, Steve Timson. So let's have a look at these weapons. Let's start with the detonator. This is a proximity mine launcher. I am not a fan of this weapon, not because the weapon is bad. It is actually very good in Dead Space. Just in general in video games, I am not a big mine person. Like proximity mines, claymores, trip mines, anything like that just isn't for me. And I don't know why, I just personally do not find it fun. Then we have the javelin gun, which fires these massive spikes, which impale enemies into walls, which never gets old. It's very good against the hunter-type necromorphs. These guys like to hide behind crates and then charge directly at you, whereas with these, you can turn around, shoot them, and they go flying back and get impaled into the wall, which is always a good time. Next up is the plasma cutter. Okay, let's read about our favorite gun in all of Dead Space, the plasma cutter. Just as Isaac's mask has become one of Dead Space's most potent symbols, so too has his plasma cutter become a thing of legend. It is indeed pretty iconic, both for fans as well as us, agrees she, Wei Lao. This was the first weapon that was prototyped when we had the idea of dismemberment gameplay. Pretty early on, and the plasma cutter was one of the earliest weapon sketches I did, even with those curved fins sticking out from a handgun-like stock. While it wasn't heavily based on a particular tool in real life, it was the first tool we needed to develop in order to make the whole gameplay concept work. There had to be a heavy cutting tool that Isaac modified to have damaging range, as well as the ability to rotate its cutting angles. So yeah, you can choose to fire this either in horizontal or vertical mode. So this picture here is showing Isaac holding it in the vertical mode. Continuing on, we even thought of multiple angles and how it could cut, but eventually it became more practical for the game to have vertical and horizontal cuts. And we pretty much used the plasma cutter as our gameplay combat model and evolved other weapons from there, which makes sense. So, yeah, the plasma cutter is my favorite gun in the game, in all of Deadspace, really. We have some concept art of it here. Like I said in the beginning of the video, there is an achievement in the first Deadspace for beating the game only using the plasma cutter, which I got by accident. I didn't even know that was an achievement. I just used the plasma cutter the entire game because it was like the best gun. And then when the remake came out, I saw that they kept that achievement in the remake. So on my first playthrough on hard, I only used the plasma cutter, and it was some of the most fun I've ever had in recent years playing a horror game. In subsequent playthroughs, I have gone back and used all of the other weapons, which are all amazing, except the pulse rifle. We don't talk about that. The pulse rifle is like a weapon that we just don't talk about on this channel. So yeah.